Alright, and welcome to the Promethei section of the toggle drill. Finally we're at toggle drill. Been looking really forward to getting to this section to show you all the things that are possible. For the Fire Dojo, it's Primal Basic number 5 according to our little organizational chart. And of the basics of the axis drill methods, it is the highest basic method you could reach for our scale of more pieces, less effort. So now originally this is a two-person method, two-person technique, and but this and we're going to go over that, how that's done in our science of the basic form. We'll show you the basic form. And but when we get to art of the variation, which I'm very excited to get to quickly, the toggle drill for the Fire Dojo has been very essential in proving a lot of my theories from Dao Lao Core 4 theories of really what's possible and what a person can do and pull off with friction firekeeping. It's gone places where no one in the world has gone before with methods and techniques because of these theories. So not just anyone of normal average function, not just them, can pull off this technique, and that includes people of a young age. For example, my son, Jacob. So we're going to do the two-person toggle drill together. But in art of the variation, it would be very possible to not only have a child to do it on their own as a method and technique, but most likely also people with disabilities. People who have limitations. And in the last section I started off with mentioning, what if you only have one arm to work with? Things like that. Well, the toggle drill, as you'll see later when we go into the civilized variations of things that were created in the Fire Dojo, we're going to see some things that are going to be extremely easy for people even with disabilities to do. But here's what I'm really excited about showing you when we get into toggle drill. So far we've already gone into woods that people who even have experience, a lot of experience with friction firekeeping, we've gone over some woods and done woods and gotten coals with woods that people wouldn't even normally imagine trying to get away with. Oak, hickory, ash, things like that. Osage orange, walnut. Most people wouldn't even touch those things. But we've pretty much proven that it can be done if everything is balanced, according to the theories. But we're going to go even beyond woods of that hardness. So, in fact, we're going to get into a few of the world's most hardest woods, just to show you how easy this method is, toggle drill, if you balance all the variables correctly. Okay? And I'm excited to get started and to show you these things, so let's jump right into science of the basic form with my son Jake, and so that we can move on to art of the variation, so I could show you those things. Alright? First thing we're going to go over is how to make a two-person set, and we're going to do that quickly with a 2x4 and knock that out. So let's get going. Alright, so welcome to Science of the Basic Form of the Toggle Drill. Primal Basic number 5 on our list. and we're going to make a 2-person set. So you're going to do that from your 2x4 that you leftover pieces from that you did probably from the pump drill that we just went over. Now you're going to cut the rest of your 2x4 into 1-foot sections, approximately 1-foot sections, and hopefully that piece that you got at the hardware store is sided straight, doesn't have much of a propeller twist or anything like that, or it shouldn't have it at all. Should be fairly straight grained, like this one here. Okay. Should be fairly free of knots. Alright. And should be fairly intact. For example, parts of this stud that I got, this 2x4, it has a crack in it. See that? So be wary of things like this, these problems with wood. Okay. Now, take your 1-foot sections, okay, take one of them, and hopefully you have a table saw. So here's how we're going to do this. Now, the first thing we need to cut is, well, first we need to get our measurements. And the measurements we need, okay, now a 2x4, if you remember, is actually 3.5 by 1.5. So the first thing we're going to do is get the middle of the pine stud. So that's 3.25 and 3.25. Okay, so we're going to measure that out. 3.25. 3.25. And we're going to draw our line down the middle so we know where to rip this on the table saw. Okay. Now pick one side and we're going to separate that into 1 inch and 3/4 of an inch. So get your 1 inch measurement, and the other is going to be, what's left over is 3.25. Okay. Draw your line so you know where to rip it. I'm getting it. There we go. Okay. Alright, so your stud should look like this. It should be a line down the middle, so 1 3/4 and 1 3/4, and then take one side and separate that into 1 inch and 3/4 of an inch. Should be fairly easy to do. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to get on my safety glasses, my gloves, okay, and we're going to rip this piece into the 3 sections that we need. Okay. Now, the first measurement I'm going to get on my table saw here is the 3/4 of an inch. Okay. So I'm going to rip the one here on the outside, 3/4 of an inch. Then I'm going to turn the saw off, adjust it to 1 inch. Okay. Take off the 1 inch section. Okay. And that leaves us with the third section, which should be 1 3/4. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and be right back. Now, specifically what these 3 pieces are for, the 3/4 inch one is going to be our base. Okay. The 1 3/4 piece is going to be a new device, which we call the pressure T brace. Okay. And the 1 inch one is actually going to be our spindle. Now, The piece that you just cut is now 1 inch by 1.5 inch. So what this actually needs to be for a spindle is 1 inch by 1 inch. Okay, so we're going to put this back on our table saw, and we're going to make it, as we sight down one of the sides, it's going to be 1 inch square by 12 inches. Okay, so let's do that, and then we'll be able to carve out our spindle, and we're going to round off some of the edges of some of these pieces and have our set ready, and then we're going to work on our toggle cord. Okay, next. Alright, so we're back. We've cut our pieces. Okay, I've even rounded them off. First, I'm going to restate that we're starting off this way with things that you've gotten at the hardware store, because again, some people, in fact a lot of people, can't just go into nature, can't go into wilderness and pick out pieces. A lot of those, that kind of environment sometimes is just not around, not available. But when I teach here, basically when I teach with anything, but here at Fire Dojo, I try to keep things very clear and sincere. Okay, I'm not trying to make things simple. I would rather things be clear rather than insult anyone's intelligence. I will try to make things as basic in understanding as possible, and then move up and along from there after we build a foundation. But I try to keep everything sincere too. I have to try to be the teacher that I would have always wanted. Okay. Now, another reason why we start off, at least with all of these methods that I've been showing, I'm going to refer again to my obsidian example. Obsidian is volcanic glass. It's a natural stone that occurs in nature in volcanic areas. In not all volcanic areas, but in some. And it's, in my opinion, probably one of the best materials you could ever practice stone tool making with. The reason for that is if you get really good homogeneous stone without impurities and it's consistent throughout, it will reveal to you when you start to do your strikes and everything to the stone to see how stone works, at least how energy travels through stone to make stone tools. Obsidian is the best, in my opinion. Obsidian really shows you the most efficient, the best, almost the ultimate way that energy will transfer through a stone to reveal to you what can really happen. So this is why I always say practice with obsidian when you're learning stone tools, because when you go to make stone tools out of some kind of lesser grade material, you have no idea in your mind what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Now what you have, because you've worked with obsidian, is you have set a very high standard as to what is it that you're trying to achieve, or at least some kind of level of understanding that is as high as possible. So when we're learning structure and function and trying to pull out the variables, the principal factors that are in between, the things that lie in between structure and function in order to understand things, I feel you have to use and utilize things that allow for you in your mind to see how it can be accomplished well and efficiently and to the best of your ability that you could ever do in a basic foundation way. So I wouldn't expect anyone to go out into nature and collect materials that they've never used before. I mean, how would you know what to look for? How would you know? You wouldn't have in your mind what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So here we're going to do something, accomplish it, get a success, and then if you want to do things primitively, more power to you. But then you can go out into the wilderness, because now you have in your mind the things that you need and how you're probably going to be able to shape them. You're going to be able to better balance out the principles, the variables, the principal factors of the variables. But before that, you would have no idea what you're doing. So even when you are training in martial arts, you train in a dojo. You don't go out on the street and start picking fights. Okay, that's doing things primitively without any kind of guidance. So first you need guidance, you need foundation, you need basics, you need understanding of variables, of principal factors. You should be in a dojo for years and years and years, hopefully, before you're gonna have real confidence on how to de-escalate a fight or something violent, some kind of conflict. So here, your survival is at stake. Your tribe's, even worse, your tribe's survival is at stake. So here in our dojo, fire dojo, we're going to clarify for you things that you need, how to go about it, and then you can go into nature and figure those things out once you have an understanding of it. And to me, that's clear and sincere. Okay? So on my belt sander, I've rounded off all the sharp edges of our pressure T-brace, okay? A 1.5 by, 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. I rounded off the sharp edges of our base, which is 1.5 by 3/4 by 1 foot. And I went ahead and with our 3/4 inch, 1 inch dowel piece, I went off and rounded that out. Now, just like a bow drill spindle, I put a very sharp pencil point at the top and a shallow point at the bottom, because we're going to have to make this in. Now, obviously, this is the core 2, and the pressure T-brace is going to go on top, and this is how it's going to get mated together. So I'm going to start a hole in the pressure T-brace, and I'm going to get this burned in with my son. We'll do that together. So, but before that, the other component that you need for this 2-person method is you need a toggle cord, okay, which is how it gets its name. So with your cord, get yourself about a 4-foot stretch, okay, 4-foot stretch of cord. Then remember that broom handle that we used for pump drill? We'll take your broom handle, but in this case, I have a smaller dowel of oak because my son is going to use it. His grip is smaller, okay? The chances are when you do this 2-person, you're going to do this with another larger person, an adult maybe or something. But my son is only 9, so his hands are smaller. So for him, I made toggles that are more to his hand size. Now I'm going to say to you, cut your broomstick toggles at 5 inches, okay? At a size of 5 inches for any standard adult. I made these ones a little smaller for my son. These are 4 inches, okay, so you can get his hand around these. After you cut your toggles, you're going to need to drill a hole through them for the cord to go through. Drill that hole right in the middle, okay? And then tie knots on each end so that it doesn't go anywhere, okay? So, and these are our pieces. for the toggle drill. So we're going to get this mated together, 4 sides of the basic form, and let's get a coal. Keep going. All right. Right here. Okay, start off easy. Nope, got slack. Don't slack. Okay, go. Nope, you got slack. You're not supposed to slack. Okay. No slack. You're giving slack. Keep this tight. Pull. Nope, you're slacking. Okay. No, okay. You have slack in the line. Hold that. Okay. Keep it tight, both ends. Okay, go. Nope, you have slack in the line. It's spinning. Okay, go. Nope, you're slacking the line. Keep tension on it. You have to keep pulling on both ends, okay? No, you're letting one side go. Okay, you can't do that. Okay, go. No, you're not keeping it tight. Nope, you're letting it. Okay, go. That's it. Okay, faster. Keep tension on it. Keep pulling on it. Pull. Faster, faster. Nope, you're slacking. Okay. Alright, very good. Very good. We'll keep practicing that. Now, if you'll remember, back when I first explained and started talking about cordage and fibers and getting them and making them, there are 2 main principles. There's 2 main variables that's involved with cordage. And they are tensile strength and flexibility, if you'll remember. Tensile strength is cordage having the ability to being able to be pulled and not break. Okay? Flexibility means that it can wrap around also and not break as well. So when you're doing mouth toggle drill and mouth bow drill, the cord has to have both of those factors, both of those principles and those variables definitely need to be in place. Okay, so that needs to be the quality of your cordage, of your fiber that you're working with, for one thing. Now the other thing too is, in order to make the technique work, to balance out the variable, to make this work with this cordage, with this one more device being the cordage, you cannot have slack on one end when one end is pulling. So here I have Jake, and he's going to pull a little bit on this cordage to make this spin. Okay? Go ahead, Jake. Okay, slowly, slowly. Now, what happens here is that he pulls one, but the other, there's no slack. So he doesn't help this other one along by pushing. See what happens? There's a, nope, there's a slack. There can't be a slack. The tension has to always be maintained. Okay? So when he does this, okay, there's always a tension. So even though this one over here, when one pulls, the other gives, where it's giving, there's still tension on the line. Understand what I'm saying? Because if you pull and you have slack, go ahead, pull. Okay, it's going to slip. Okay, so you have to maintain tension on the line at all times. Okay, from both ends, regardless of what end is doing what. Okay, very good, Jake. Now the bow, and we'll get into this again in detail with the. All right, so we're back. And I've decided to use a lower density spindle for Jake because he's younger and his energy is a little less than what we require for this example. So we're still going to use the base of pine. It's still filled with dust all the way to the top to make it easier for him. We're going to burn this into a new base hole. Okay. Now this is a 10-inch long yucca stalk. Okay, and it's about three quarters of an inch in diameter. So I'm going to step on each side of the base, like I was doing. Okay, and I'm going to raise that up. And we're not going to pull too hard on this because we don't want to break the spindle. Okay, so we're going to warm that up. Ready, Jake? Straighten out your legs. Okay. Good. They can't see the base. All right, hold on one second. Stop. So we're going to face this way. You're going to come around this way. Okay. Move over. Now there. Just sit over there. Okay. A little more. Okay. Now put your leg down so you can see the base. Okay. Put your foot on the outside. Oh. Okay. All right, ready? There we go. So we're actually, in a way, we're mating this and going to go for this all at the same time. All right, ready? Just go and don't stop. That's it. Make it smoke. That's it. Don't stop. Don't stop. You can do it. Keep going. Keep going. That's it. Keep going. Go, 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 go. You're almost there. Go. Go, go, go. All right, don't freak out. Keep going. Go, 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 go. Go. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Make it smoke. Make it smoke. Make it smoke. Make it smoke. 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 Okay, stop.
Why?
Oh.
Did it? Oh, I did it.
Very good.
Did it?
Good job.
I did it?
Yep, you did it. All right, so like I said before in pump drill, it's up to the teacher to make sure that everything is in balance when kids are doing this.
Ow.
Good job. Alright, so there's our coal. And that's the basic toggle drill form, method, technique. And what I really want to share with you is you could see this method being done in how it used to be done by the Inuit people of the Arctic Circle area. And so I'm going to give you a website address for a photo that I obviously don't have permission to have. So I can give you the address so you could just go to it. And because I don't want to reproduce it on my site. I don't have rights to it. But you could look it up for yourself, so I'll give you the address. And so what you're seeing is a couple, an Inuit couple, who are doing the toggle drill as it was done, and it's around the year 1930. So that's basically the setup for it, and you'll see that Jake and I were trying to do it the same way that they were, except we weren't trying to do it on a dog sled. Of all the pieces that you need the pressure T-brace, which I call it. You need the spindle. You need the base. You need a cord. You need 2 toggles. But the real key to this equipment is that you need another person. And again, here in the Fire Dojo, we try to do everything as one person. So the art of the variation from this point on is based on the one-person method for the toggle drill. Okay? So we're going to need more equipment. So we're going to need to do the pressure lever brace, which you saw in the giant drill. This is going to be a more involved explanation of that pressure lever brace. And I'm excited to show you what things are possible. Alright? So from this point on, we're going to art of the variation. Okay? Here we go. All right, and so what we're going to do next for our toggle drill, the pressure lever brace we're going to do is going to be a class 3 lever. So FRE 1, 2, 3, right? So the effort is going to be in the middle, and which means that the fulcrum and the resistance is going to be on either end. All right, but we're going to do all 3 classes of levers. So we'll have one that has the fulcrum in the middle, and we'll have one that has the resistance in the middle. We'll go through all 3. So the first one we're going to do actually is a class 3, which is one that I like to do. And how we're going to do this is we're going to make the set entirely out of apple. I mentioned earlier that in the storm that we had, my neighbor's apple tree, some huge branches came down. Well, we harvested those branches, and here in this box is only a sampling of what actually took off some of those branches. So what we have in here is going to be some bow spindles, some mouth and hand drill spindles, and we got some Y branches. Actually, this Y branch is what we're going to be using for our lever. All right, this is going to be the top of the lever that is going to have the effort in the middle, and the fulcrum on the end here by the fork, and the resistance is going to be on this end, right here at the Y. All right. Now this is apple. This thick branch is apple, and what we're going to do is we're going to be making a torque spindle out of this. Okay, so I'm going to work on that. We have our reload of apple, and we have our base of apple as well. Okay, now what's necessary for this lever that we're going to do is, like I said, we need 2 pillars, and my He Dojo here, my Fire Dojo, has 6 pillars, but we need a cross bar. So one of the large branches of the apple here, okay, this is going to be a crossbar, and we're going to hang that up on 2 of the pillars. But the first thing I need to do is get my torque spindle ready, because how I measure the height of the lever in this case is going to be measured by the height of the spindle. So I'm going to prepare the spindle, and then we're going to measure that to get the height of the cross bar. All right, and then we're going to light it up after I show you how everything gets lashed together. Okay, so I'm going to work on these, and we'll be right back. Alright, so here's what we've done so far. I've taken that stick that's going to be a spindle, I put it on my lathe, and took it down, took the bark off. You can see it's still a little bit green there. And pointed the brace end. I put a socket hole in the base end. It's quartered. It's about a 5/8 inch. I used a Forstner bit to drill the hole, and it fits this 3/4 inch reload of apple, and that'll fit in there with a hose clamp. The base is apple. It's a flattened branch, and as you can see, I used a Forstner bit to start the hole, which should fit nicely. Okay, Now our crossbar, I've lashed to 2 of the pillars. Now as you can see, I have 2 different kinds of lashings going on. I have a diagonal lashing on this side, and I have a square lashing on this side. And these are some basic Boy Scout type lashings. So they could start off with like a timber hitch or a clove hitch, then you do the diagonal lashings, and then you have the frapping, which goes around the lashing, okay, a few times, and then you tie it off with your favorite knot, maybe a clove hitch or something, which is what I did. So we have both kinds, and your choice. Now the Y brace, as you can see here, it's sort of diagonal lashed on this one end and sort of diagonal lashed on this end, tied off with clove hitches. And as you can see, it sits up by itself because it's lashed on there fairly tightly, but it could still move, which is very important, because if you lash it too tightly, then you don't allow for the lever action, because this end is the fulcrum. Here we have the fulcrum. Like I said, we're going to do a class 3 lever. So underneath here, we have the socket hole for the brace here at the Y, okay, and that'll fit in there, just like that, okay. Now again, I had mentioned that I had to do the spindle first to measure out how high the cross bar was going to be, okay. So that's what I did. I finished the spindle, and I made it so that without the base and the reload in there, as you can see, it's flat on the table there, the Y brace of the pressure lever brace is even, is flat, is level at this point. So if we were to add the base as well as the reload, okay, it would make it go higher. So that way the pressure lever brace would actually be higher than flat, higher than level, okay. And I want that mainly because one of the things that I don't like to see happening is if the spindle starts to go down and down and down, the lever goes down like this, and I'm always afraid that the weights, which are going to be on top, are going to fall forward. They're going to kind of like slide off and go toward you, because you're going to be in front of this thing. So I always want it to be at a minimum of level when I put the weights on. Now as you can see, I have some crossbar lashings on here, held in place with some basic pipe cleaners. Alright, because they don't need to be that sturdy, they're just going to hold some of the weights in place, as you'll see in a second. Okay. Here you can see the frappings too on these lashings. Alright, so we're getting ready to go here. Alright. So now the weights, how I'm going to place these weights is with these sticks. Okay, so how it's going to look is something like this. I'm going to put this stick in the weight, okay, and then because of these crossbar things here, I could just fit the hold on one second. I had to put the spindle in place to hold it up. So the spindle is there in place. Now the weight is going to be held in place just like that. Simply because these sticks are going to hold just like this, and not go anywhere. I could do this one this way, right? Let me just put the other weight on. Just like that. And there we go. Now this is one example of a way to put weights on. You could put them directly on top of these cross braces and kind of tie them down, lash them down, however you want to do it. This is a class 3 lever. So what we have here is the resistance on the end, and we have the effort in the middle, and the fulcrum on one end, because it's FRE 1, 2, 3, right? So a class 3 lever is going to have the E, the effort, in the middle. All right. So we're going to get this base, along with the reload, mated together. And then we're going to get us a coal. All right? Let's get that going. All right, so before we actually mate this set together, like I said we're going to do, there's some important devices we need to go over for the toggle drill, because what we're running into now are complications. Remember, when you start adjusting these variables, when you mess with one thing, sometimes you mess up another variable. Okay, now we're supposed to, with this set, traditionally have 2 people. Okay, now with 2 people, someone is standing on the base and holding the pressure T-brace with 2 hands and keeping that steady and stable. Well, the problem with the setup of the toggle drill here without another person is that when you apply weights, okay, there's the health variable is a safety issue. Okay, so let's say we have the spindle underneath the Y brace, okay, the pressure Y brace. Now it has the weights on it. Now here, can you see the problem? You're pulling on the cord, and what can happen is you pull this out. And if you're familiar with wilderness skills, you may know the Deadfall Traps. Deadfalls are traps that have a huge weight on them, and when the trigger is released, as an example, the spindle here that's holding the brace up with the weight, if the trigger goes out, if it's trapped, the weight goes down and kills an animal. Okay? Can you see the problem here? So if you pull on this thing and the stability goes away, this could potentially fall on somewhere on you. It could fall on your leg, your hand. It could break your set, and then you have to start all over from scratch. Okay? And if the weights are loose, when this thing falls, these things can go anywhere. Okay, so you have to be very careful. So we have to develop new devices due to the complications that has arisen from this. Now, the ones, and I'm going to call these safeties. Now, the safeties I'm going to show you are by no means all of them. Okay, now you can get very creative, and there's plenty more different kinds you can make. But here's some examples I'm going to show you. And here is, I have a bar coming off the cross brace here, and I tied these down with artificial sinew here, and here, and here. So we have a triangle. Okay? Now this bar here actually goes across the stem of the Y. Okay? And that supports the Y. Now this bar here, coming off this side, goes underneath this bar here to support that. And then what we have here is a tripod, which I quickly lashed together. Now I want to show you how nicely this fits. So I'm going to take the camera off for a second. And I'm going to show you that how this fits. Fix this here. How this fits right into the tripod very nicely, right? It's a perfect fit. Okay, so here we have the lashing to the cross brace there. Now this one supports the brace here, which goes under the stem of the Y. Okay, and it's lashed there. Now for a closer look, okay, the Y brace rests on this bar, if necessary. All right, and it's held up by a tripod. Now you can see I'm not perfectly aligned here, or I could be, if I'm lucky, with the spindle. Okay, when I'm pulling the cord, I might have to be off to the side a little bit, but we can adjust for that. But here the point is that if I have the spindle underneath here, okay, now I'm going to put the camera back. All right, and here we go. Here's our example. I have the toggle cords, okay. The spindle is holding up the Y brace right now. I have my safety in place, so if I pull away the spindle, the whole pressure lever brace gets caught and it's a safety. And that way we stay safe. Okay, so that solves that complication in case that happens. All right, because we have to stay safe. So let me show you a couple more. All right. So I'm going to stop the camera. I'm going to remove this one brace. All right, and so you could clearly see the other. Now for this next one, here I just have the tripod, and it's a little shorter than I would like. But as an example, okay, the reason why I had the bars across in the first place was because now we have a complication, a space issue. Here clearly the tripod is sitting in front of the spindle, and that kind of keeps me from being able to do my back and forth rotations with the cord in a clear manner, okay? Because this is obviously in the way, all right? But here, if I were to remove the spindle, okay, the tripod would catch the bar again if it were to slip, okay? Let's do another one. Let's put the spindle back. Now another one you could do is a simple Y branch. Now you have to make sure that maybe this needs to be supported with some cord around here, because you don't want this to split down the middle. Okay, if this catches just right, it may just break along the grain like a wishbone. Okay, and you don't want to do that. Now this Y stick is supposed to actually be maybe another foot longer. Okay, if you could say at least another foot, and that foot gets buried into the ground like a stake. Okay, so but here you have to pretend that this is the ground and this is actually buried in the ground in order to catch the Y brace when that falls. Okay, this can't just be a stick that just sits on the ground, because that won't be stable. Okay, it has to catch it. All right, so that's another example. Now remember, all of your safeties have to be sitting below, okay, because you have to measure in the height of the reload and the height of the base. So if the base and the reload height give way, it has to be at the height that will catch at the safety. All right? So here's another. Now in old Japan, actually in some parts of the country of Japan, they have fireplaces inside their homes called an irori. And from the irori hangs a hook from which iron pots hang from like near the ceiling and over the fire. And from this idea, you take a hook. Here's a branch that comes off a sapling. By the way, all these are still made out of the apple that we collected. The tripod is apple, the cross braces, the Y stick. This hook is all made from apple, just like the whole entire set. The pressure Y brace, these sticks, the spindle, the reload, the base, all of it is apple. So we get our hook there, okay, so that it stays in place, so that if the spindle gives way, the hook catches the pressure lever brace. Now, since you have two pillars with the crossbar, okay, the pillars are probably going to be trees, right? And if there's a branch coming off one or two of the pillars, you would suspend this cord from one of those branches if one of those branches is strong enough to stabilize and support it, for one thing. And it has to be directly over where it would come straight down, if you know what I mean, of the pressure lever brace. Okay? So let's do another. Let's get this out of here. Okay. Now another could be you have branches that come off both trees. Right? You have branches that come off both trees, and you would tie a cord to the stem of the Y. So now, if your spindle gives way, your cord, as the safety, catches the pressure lever brace and keeps you safe again. Alrighty. So there's many that you can do. This could just be a noose loop hanging instead of a hook that you would have to carve. And so there's many ideas that you can come up with. But it's important, if you're going to do it this way for the toggle drill, that you have these safeties in place. Alright? And then I'm going to show you when I do the box sets of the toggle drill. You'll see that the safety isn't necessary because it's held up by the walls, but we'll get to that. Alright? So let's make this set together, okay? Apple on apple. Here we go. Okay, so our set is made stable. Now, again, I'm not doing this on the ground, so I can pin it to the ground. I'm doing it on my table. So, like you've seen in the past, I've nailed my base to the table, okay, as opposed to pinning it in the ground with some stakes, okay, as a simulation. Now, here we have a base of apple and a reload of apple on a spindle of apple with a pressure a pressure lever brace of apple and a crossbar of apple. And so I've greased up the brace end of the spindle, and I got my holes drilled and set for the base end for the reload. And it seems like forever and a day ago that we were talking about stone tools and doing these things. We're obviously using power tools to just kind of speed things up and get things going. So here I'm going to make this set together, and then when I'm done, I'm going to pull the spindle out and show you the safety working again. Okay? So the cord is wrapped around several times. Well, the other thing too is the person that would be, because this is a two-person drill traditionally, that person is holding the spindle at a certain angle, okay? Because the person that's holding the cord and doing the back and forth drilling, okay, is exerting pressure in one direction, okay? Now, with the hand drill and the mount drill, we have the bilateral force, right? We have bilateral force. Now with the bow, we have a unilateral force going in each direction. Okay? Now, and with the pump drill, you also again have a bilateral force, okay, because the cords are on both sides. Here the toggle drill is different. Here you have reciprocation going back and forth, but it's not going like a bow drill one way and then another. It's not going this way. Both unilateral directions are both going in the same direction. So what can happen is you're forcing the spindle to burn toward you all the time. So you're going to get drift. Okay, drift is bound to happen. This is a complication that's bound to happen when you're doing the toggle drill. Now, the person that's holding the pressure T-brace normally adjusts for this by adjusting the angle. They can adjust backward, they can adjust forward, they just have to lean forward or backward. Here you can't do that. Okay, the entire set has to be made stable. So what you can do is set up your spindle at the certain angle that you're burning. Okay, I know it's going to burn this way. Okay. The other thing too is if you're going to get drift, you don't want to drift toward your notch, and you don't want to drift too far away from your notch either. So, like with the mouth drill, the notch is on the opposite side, so you could see down. Okay. With most of the other drills, the notch can face toward you. But in this instance, I'm having the force burning toward me. That's definitely going to drill and burn into the notch if I had it this way. So here's the thing. When I do toggle drill, I like to have my base set up not across from the spindle, but actually in line with the force. So as you can see, the base here is actually in line with the direction that I'm pulling. All right? So it doesn't burn into the notch or too far away from the notch. Okay? We're just mating it now. But when I'm done with this, we're going to put the notch on the side, and then we don't have to be afraid of a burning drift going either direction. It's actually, if it burns any direction, it burns into the base, along the length of the base. Okay? So I've had that happen many times. So here we go. So again, we have a crossbar connected to two trees with a pressure Y brace. All right, and it's mated. And I promised you I was going to remove the spindle and show you the safety. And there we go, just in case. See, I'm still safe. So let me pull this out for you for a minute. All right. We can get a good look at this. All right, so it's mated. You can see it has the reverse button in there from the space in the spindle. In the reload, I have it drilled to get rid of that dead space center. Okay, so you can see I'm going to pop that button out, and I'm going to carve the notch, and we're going to light this thing up. Okay. All right, so I put my notch in. I took out the dead space button. I'm going to put this back. Stabilize it in there. I'm going to put a little bit of sawdust in the notch, just halfway. Here's our reload spindle, the dead space. I'm going to flatten it just a little bit. sandpaper, or an abrading stone as it would be. Okay. We have our safety. I'm going to grease that one more time. The linseed oil. Okay. And wrap that one more time. It's wrapped around several times. And we're going to go for a coal. Get it nice and warmed up. Now again, a thing about not rushing. Okay, it's not a race. And the thing is that you don't want to stop too soon. Okay? Even if you have a coal, you can see that you have a coal, you could keep going. Because the more dust you make, the more fuel you make. Okay? The more fuel you have, the longer that coal is going to live. So don't get into a race where you got the first coal, because when you dump that coal into your tinder bundle, oh, and there's our coal. And there's our coal. But when you dump that coal into your tinder bundle, you when you start blowing on it, you're going to run out of coal extender because you didn't go long enough and make more fuel. Let me get a card here. I didn't put down my coal catcher. And there we go. Apple on apple. Toggle drill. And there you go. Press your Y brace. Alright, so our next one is going to be the Trident. Okay? The Trident variation of the pressure lever brace. Okay? Here we go.